Yo, what's going on, guys? It's G-Miners here, and in this video, I'm going over my full day 1 loadout, going into the day 1 raid for Root of Nightmares, which is coming up this Friday. Okay, so starting things off, this is what I'm going into the raid race with more than likely. I might switch out Egger Scepter for Riptide, but these are just super good to start raid races off with. You have a ton of ad clear, it helps you get to the first encounter super fast, and then I'll probably just be on the Starfire build the entire time. So that's what I'm loading in with, but that said, in the Kinetic slot, we also have Izanagi's Burden. This is great for DPS rotations, which I will cover later in the video. Submission is super good. I won't be using primaries too much during the raid race unless I need them for champion stunning, but Submission is one of the best SMGs. Succession is one of the best snipers just because of reconstruction. I personally like Vorpal on my role, plus this is craftable, so it's easy to get. Heritage, same exact thing. It's a solid slug shotgun and 100% craftable. Arbalest is extremely strong. It has high total damage output, and it can be used in swapping rotations similar to Izanagi's Burden. I personally will probably be using this over Izzy during most of the raid race because during the mid game, where you're going up against tankier enemies and champions, it's great for anti-barrier, it's good against shields, and it has way better ammo economy. Witherhoard is still going to be great to have up even after last season's nerf. Only one person should have this during a damage rotation, but it's still great for ad clear. I do have a blinding auto-loading GL. I don't think blinding is really worth it, but I have it just in case I need the crowd control. And then Osteostriga is one of the best primaries to bring in. Once again, I probably won't be on primaries too much, but I have this just in case. I just have the rest of the weapons stored here on my Titan to make things quicker. Riptide with Chill Clip is one of the best weapons in the game. If I don't load in to the raid with Egger Scepter, this will be what I'm on, and I'll have this ready to hot swap to either way. I do also have a roll with Frenzy, which is better for damage, and Lead from Gold, which has slightly better ammo economy. Not that it's really needed because you can do infinite special finishers. And then lastly, Outbreak Perfected and Touch of Malice are both going to be infused once I get the infusion materials so that I can have them for primary DPS if I ever run out of heavy or special ammo. Outbreak will be better if you have your entire team running it because you have more nanites attached to a boss, which means higher DPS for your team. However, Touch of Malice is just going to be better if you have less players on it or if you're swapping to do super quick, short phase primary DPS where you can't stack the nanites up for as long. As I mentioned, I have a Forbearance with Ambitious and Chain Reaction. This is hands down the best gun in the entire game. I don't think I'm going to be taking this off during the entire raid race because you always need ad clear. The only reason I would be for something like a trace rifle if I need to shoot to input symbols or something of that nature, interact with mechanics, etc. Or if it's not useful because enemies aren't really on the ground all that much. Retrace Path, Path of Least Resistance, and then also Hollow Denial are all 3 weapons that you should have infused. Lead from Gold Repulsor Brace is really good on Hollow Denial. If you don't like Repulsor Brace, then Killing Tally works. Here I have Shoot to Loot, and I'll eventually have Volt Shot once I level this back up. And then here I have Subsistence and Incandescent. Deafening Whisper or the new Harsh Language Waveframe, along with Explosive Personality, are both great, just different burns and different roles if you want them for that reason. And I will also have up Salvager's Salvo, but I don't realistically think I'm going to be using that a whole bunch. If I ever decide to do a triple weapon swap rotation, this is why I have Truth Teller with Spike Grenades and then auto-loading holster. This will work with an auto-loading rocket like Hothead and then Izanagi's Burden as well. Fusion-wise, Cartesian Coordinate is going to be the best bet for damage. It's the best frame, plus you have Vorpal Weapon for a 15% bonus on every shot against the boss. No Composure is Void, it works with Volatile Flow, and it also has Feeding Frenzy and Reservoir Burst, making it a better weapon for ad clear. For energy primaries, I have 3 of the best primary SMGs in the game, which is going to be Icalos, Callous Mini Tool, and then Funnel Web. I also have an Unforgiven, which I'll probably bring up myself. Once again, I don't see myself using primaries too often during the raid race, but if I do, I have these ready to go. Philo is still going to be the best in class slug shotgun for the energy slot. And then moving on to exotics, Trinity Ghoul is extremely good ad clear as an exotic primary as well, which we might use to generate heavy ammo with heavy ammo finders and then double heavy ammo scouts. Lord of Wolves, Fourth Horseman, and then also Merciless are 3 of the best burst DPS weapons as far as special weapons go in the entire game. So I'm going to have these ready just in case we have a very short damage phase where these are preferable. Lastly, even though I'm not going to be running Divinity, I'll have this ready to go just in case for some reason I need to swap to it. Lastly, Risk Runner offers damage resistance whenever you take arc damage, so this can help keep you alive, and the Chain Lightning is just as good as Trinity Ghoul, if not better for close range ads. I know I didn't cover primaries other than SMGs in the Kinetic or Energy slot. I will still have things like Scouts and Pulses ready to go, but they're just a lot less role dependent, so any role that you have should work just fine, and the main reason to use them is for range or for going against champions. Moving on to heavy weapons, I'm just going to be sprinting through these because most of them are going to be covered in detail in the damage section of the video. The other half, or any Eager Edge Sword, is super good. I prefer it on Void so that I can use volatile rounds for ad clear if I need that too. Parasite is used for high burst DPS. Galley for buffing rockets with Wolfpack rounds. Sleeper is used as a quick burst DPS out of the gate linear, but it will get passed by other linears. I have a Hothead with autoloading and explosive light, and then a Hothead with field prep and clown cartridge, along with a Palmyra, which is a good rocket to have as a tracking option. Tractor is good for the 30% debuff. I don't think I will use Thunderlord, but it's good to have if your exotic slot's free and you are using an LMG to ad clear. And then lastly, I do have on Xenophage, which I like for a lot of encounters when paired with holster mods. Falling Guillotine is pretty much a legendary version of Lament for close range damage. Wendigo is decent, but I doubt it'll be used because it's passed up by rockets, but this has autoloading and explosive lights. And then Acreus is good for high burst DPS along with good sustained DPS as long as you're within range. Taipan is personally my favorite linear to use, but Cataclysmic works here too. Lament is great for high burst DPS and good for sustained DPS too, as long as you can be close to the boss you're damaging. And then Grand Overture is also good for high burst DPS during the right time interval. Lastly, Commemoration is a great ad clear weapon, especially with volatile rounds, and I do have Anarchy here. I wouldn't recommend people using this for a Starfire protocol build. You should be using weapons to deal damage because they benefit from buffs and surges, but this could be good for ad clear. When it comes to your team composition, I personally don't think this matters. I think it's much more important for players on your team to be on the class they're comfortable with, but that being said, having 2 well locks for longer damage phases exceeding 30 seconds where you need 2 wells is a great idea, and then also having 2 well locks is great for situations where there's damage dealt in high frequency and you can't get your well back between damage phases. Hunters are really going to be used for their high burst DPS supers, and on top of that, using Tether as the main 30% debuff for the raid. And then the main appeal of Titan is for banner shield, so you can get quicker weapon swaps with the Izzy auto-loading meta, along with the 40% debuff, which is slightly higher than well. All in all, my team will have 3 well locks, 2 hunters, which will be on Tether for the most part, and then a Titan as well. When it comes to dealing damage against bosses during day 1 raid races, the 2 major things you're concerned about is dealing enough damage, and then also the duration of the damage phase so that you make sure you have the optimal loadout on. In general, if you are in doubt on what to use during this raid race, I would say Izanagi's Burden, and then having Hothead with 1 player running Gallahorn on your team so that everybody gets Wolfpack rounds is the safest thing you can run. Certain loadouts that you can run, which I will be going over later, like this one, also have finders and scouts on it, along with a special finisher build setup so that you can infinitely generate ammo for your team. So as far as ammo economy goes, this shouldn't be too hard on day 1. All that said, the other major factor to consider is the time in which you have to deal damage. So right now, I'm going to be going over the best DPS options, in my opinion, starting from a super short burst DPS phase all the way up to a super long sustained damage phase. First, if it is hyper short, something like Parasite, in my opinion, is going to be the best option, where you can only get something like 1 shot off and you can instantly hit the boss. Similar to this, where you have a bit of extra time, will be something like Field Prep with Clown Cartridge, where you can spam reloads and shoot multiple rockets across the same mag. Once again, anytime you're using rockets, you do want 1 player buffing your team with Wolfpack rounds. And on top of this, something like Grand Overture would be another solid substitute if all of those missiles can hit. After this, you're going to be in the range of 10 to maybe 20 seconds for damage, and that's where Izanagi's Burden and a Hothead is going to come in clutch, which I would expect we have for most damage phases that we're going into in this raid race. Lastly, if you see a damage phase starting to exceed the 20 to 25 second range, you're going to notice you're running out of rockets and probably Izanagi's Burden or Arbalest shots, so that's when something like a Taipan is going to come in clutch. Even with the 15% nerf this season, these are still extremely strong when it comes to their ammo economy and longer damage phases. On top of this, I prefer firing line so I don't have to constantly proc bait and switch during a day 1 raid race. This just felt better the last time I used it, but if you prefer Cataclysmic to this, use that as well. I will also mention that certain bosses in the game take more crit damage than others. A perfect example of this is Kali in the Last Wish raid. For that reason, since linears hit extremely hard in the head and they don't do too great of body shot damage, that means they're going to scale up even higher against a crit based boss, making this probably better than running something like a rocket. If a linear ends up being a good fit for the style of the boss fight as well, where they're super rangy, they're moving around a lot and you want shots to instantly hit, but it's also a shorter damage phase, I think Sleeper Simulant is actually better. This will have pretty good out the gate damage, but then it'll eventually fall off after you start reloading multiple times. And then finally, if we have a melee type boss where you need burst damage or probably even sustained damage, I think Lament is going to be the play. It's extremely good at damage, it's great at its DPS, and it tends to be pretty ammo efficient, plus the combo is super easy to pull off. Moving on to damage phases and the setup you want, make sure you have a buff, a debuff, and then weapon surges. For For buffs, your best option is going to be Well of Radiance, where you get a 25% increase in weapon damage, and your entire team can be dealing damage. Along with this, I think Banner Shield is also super strong. This is a 40% buff, which is much larger. However, your Titan is not going to be able to do much damage. That being said, you do get increased handling, making your weapon swap speed even better. Lastly, for debuffs, because it's so easy to use and is the highest debuff percentage in the game at 30%, Deadfall is your best overall option. During longer damage phases, Divinity is also going to be preferable, even though it's only a 15% debuff. This is infinite as long as you have ammo to spend. On top of this, if it's hard to hit headshots, this is when you're also going to want to use Divinity, but make sure not to use it against a crit-based boss because this will lower their crit value, making precision-based weapons do less damage than they should. Lastly, I think if Tractor is usable, we're going to try and use this on day 1. This on a Starfire Warlock with fusion grenades and a fusion rifle as their secondary option makes their damage come out pretty good, while the rest of the team can get a 30% debuff and hunters can use their burst damage supers. Lastly, when it comes to weapon surges, you get a 10%, 17%, and 22% increase for the weapon you have a surge applied to. So always make sure to have 3 of these mods on when dealing damage. In the case of something like Izzy and Hothead, where Hothead hits harder, having 2 surges for Hothead and then 1 for Izzy is going to be preferable, but it's only a 1% difference. That being said, that 1% difference is assuming that Wolfpack rounds always hit for the max damage they can. So if you end up hitting immunes or seeing that Wolfpack rounds aren't always hitting the boss, this is even better in that situation. Before I go in depth with loadouts, I'm going to showcase all of the builds that we're using as a team across our Warlocks, Titans, and our Hunters. Full build videos will be linked in the description below if you guys want to check those out. On Warlock, I have this basic Voidwalker build right here. I like nothing manacles, but you can easily switch this around. This is my Stasis Turret build for Warlocks. I don't think this will be useful. Once again, Osmiomancy Gloves. My Recent Strand Warlock build will also be used if we need the crowd control, but I doubt this will happen. And then lastly, for all of our Warlocks, this will be the main build that we run for probably 90%, if not 100% of the day 1 raid race. Once again, we're using Starfire Protocol. When on Void, our Hunters will be running a build very similar to this one, utilizing Echo of Starvation, Obscurity, and Persistence. Usually they'll be running Orpheus Rigs for the super regen, if not another exotic that fits into the build. If we don't need the debuff for boss phases and for ad clear encounters, then they'll be on Gunslinger with Blade Barrage, making sure that they have Ember of Beams on so that their super projectiles all hit. And this will obviously be with Star Eater Scales. And the exact same build is going to also work on Arcstrider with Gathering Storm. This will be slightly more damage, but only one player can utilize this because Jolt only works and applies to bosses for 1 instance. Lastly, our one Titan will typically be on Sentinel. This will be Sentinel Shield when blocking for damage phases, otherwise they'll default to Word of Dawn when using this with Heart of Inmost Light. If we do need the crowd control for tankier enemies, then Berserker with Suspend and Woven Mail will be used. Here, Heart of Inmost Light is probably the best exotic you can run, or Armamentarian. The last and most important thing to take away from this video should be loadouts. I have 3 loadouts ready to go into the day 1 raid race. I have this first build, this second build, and this third build right here, all of which you can see I'm staying on the Solar subclass when I switch, which is because I think that's the build I'll be on for the most part. That said, if you look here, I have all of my abilities ready to go. My grenade's recharging because I just swapped back and forth from Starfire, but if I swap again, doing something like this, all these builds are randomly getting reapplied. I come back out, and because it is the same subclass, I keep all of my abilities. This first loadout right here, most notably, has Heavy Ammo Scouts and Heavy Ammo Finder, so that as I get kills, I generate heavy ammo for myself and teammates, along with stacks on stacks, plus the full suite of special finishers and empowered finishers on my class item, so that I can infinitely finish enemies to generate infinite special ammo. I'll be running this loadout for the most part, and then when I swap over to this loadout, you can see I have my surges here for a damage phase. I also have some dexterity mods for faster swapping, and I do have targeting just because if you're going to swap, you might as well swap additional mods to help you out, plus 1 time dilation, even though I don't think time dilation is super needed. Lastly, the third and final loadout that I have on just swaps me over to a shoot to loot weapon, which you can see right here. And then on top of that, I have triple arc reserves in this case, if I were to be using a rocket, and then 1 of each arc, solar, and void scavenger. Scavs don't stack. I just have these on by default, but I'll switch this around to fit the loadout that I have for damage phases. So with all 3 of these, I have an ammo generation loadout, then I can swap to a DPS phase loadout, and then after the DPS phase, because there's bricks on the ground, I can swap to this and pick those all up just by shooting with a shoot to loot weapon. If you don't want certain things to swap, like in this case, my weapons aren't swapping between these 2 loadouts, all you have to do is use a blue, put it in the loadout, delete it, after the loadout is saved, and then you're good to go. Other things in those slots won't be identified, and they will not swap. That should about cover everything you need to know or should start thinking of when it comes to a day 1 raid race. Hopefully this video helps you guys out, and if I did forget anything or you have any general questions, make sure to ask me down in the comments below. That's it for this video. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.